everyone, my name is Moni.
And I'm Naveen from Before You Play.
And today we're going to be previewing a game that is coming to Gamefound called Andromeda's Edge.
This game is designed by Luke and Maximus Laurie and published by Cardboard Alchemy, who are helping sponsor this video. And in this game, players are on the brink of starting a new civilization as they run away from the Unity, and they are now finding themselves at the edge of the Andromeda galaxy.
Yes, they're trying to rebuild their lives in Andromeda's Edge. Now, you might be familiar with Dwellings of Eldervale, which is the designer's previous title, and now this is their newest design that plays 1 to 5 players in about 40 minutes per player. And so today, we're going to be showing you how to play it, but for more information regarding the Gamefound campaign, we've included a link to their campaign in the description below.
Now, we do have to mention this is a prototype copy of the game, so things are subject to change in the final product. Also, if you like these kind of videos and you want to see more in the future, please consider subscribing.
And with that, we are ready to begin. So if you please direct your attention to the center of the table, we are all set up here for a 2-player game of Andromeda's Edge. Welcome to the edge of the Andromeda galaxy. Here we have arrived to rebuild our lives by building developments. We're going to be mining for resources, going up progress tracks, customizing our stations with various modules, and of course, we're going to be going into battle because we cannot be left alone to rebuild our future, right?
Right. Yes, as resources are scarce, we have intergalactic raiders as well as competition amongst the players.
That's right. And so just to kind of give you the lay of the land, each player has their own faction mat. And we also have an asymmetric faction that determines our starting resources as well as our starting advancements on the progress tracks. And so I am going to be playing as the Nebulon Cloud People.
And I am the Zodian Warmongers.
Each player also has their own set of starships, and these starships will do various things. At the start of the game, we only have 3 of the transports available to us, but we'll have the ability to build more of them, as well as the ability to upgrade the various ships. Our mats also hold our resources, and in this game, resources come in the form of energy. We have titanium, nanocarbon, ice, as well as credits. And we're going to be using these resources in order to build more modules, build our starships, as well as developments on the various planets on the board. Now, before you start the game, players are actually going to decide up to how many points to play to. So you can either end the game when somebody's reached 50 points, 60, or 70, depending on how long you want to play. And so the way that the game works is players are going to be taking turns either launching a ship to one of the regions and taking an action, or recalling your ships and taking actions at your station. So let's start by talking about what a launch turn looks like. When taking a launch action, you're going to be launching one of the ships that you have available to you. And so at the start of the game, we have 3 transports, and you're going to send the ship to one of the available regions on the board. Now, if this is your first launch, meaning you don't have any starships on the board, then you have to send your ship to an unoccupied region. So for example, I could send my ship to the trade hub. And then you're going to take the action of the region where you launch to. So there are 3 main types of regions. We have alliance bases, which give you actions. We have planets, and we have the nebulae up here. So let's go ahead and start with the alliance bases, since they are going to be the regions that give you the main actions in the game. Some alliance bases, such as the trade hub, as well as the monolith of ancients, just gain you additional stuff. So the trade hub allows you to turn in any 2 resources for 2 credits. And that is very useful because credits are a wild of sorts.
Yes, you can turn in credits for any one of these 3 other resources. So if you need something to convert, this is the best way to do it.
That's right. And the Monolith of Ancients allows you to turn in any 2 resources for 3 tactics cards. And tactics cards are going to be sort of like our wild cards in the game. They'll allow us to do unique things that you can play when the time is right. And so it'll say specifically on the card when you can use them. Next, we have the Maximus as well as the Odessa fields. And they both basically do the same thing. They allow you to purchase a module from the board. It's just the Maximus field allows you to take either the green or the brown, and Odessa allows you to take either yellow or blue.
And they actually stand for science, industry, commerce, as well as civilization.
That's right. They're not just color-coded. Now, these modules are going to be very important because they allow us to customize our stations. And they basically allow us to take additional actions when it's time to recall our ships. When taking this action, the first thing that happens is you always progress 1 step forward on the event track. And so it's important to note that with the event track, that marker actually starts on a space depending on player count. So in a 2-player game, it's going to be fewer spaces. Then, say for example, I launch to the Maximus field, I would get to choose either from the science or industry columns items, and I would pay the resources above the module that I'd like to purchase. So say, for example, I wanted to build the gravity dynamo. I would then pay 1 nanocarbon and any one resource of my choice.
Sure.
When you build a module, it actually goes to the right of your player board because you're going to be building out a tableau of sorts. So I would go ahead and put this right next to my primary reactor, which is the start of this row of modules. One thing to note, though, is some of these modules will come to you damaged, like my gravity dynamo here. And so damaged modules need to be repaired if you want to score for them or to be able to use them when recalling your ships.
They basically come non-functional to you.
Exactly. In addition, gaining a module allows you to progress up the corresponding progress track. And so since I purchased the science module, I would get to progress up that track. Now, just a note about these progress tracks. At the end of the game, you're going to score points depending on how far you went up on each one of them.
Right.
They also do various unique things depending on the track. So first things first, anytime you see this symbol, whether it be on a track or on the Maximus or Odessa field, that always means you advance on the event tracker. And so that's why we advanced when we took the action at the Maximus field. The science track in particular also has 2 areas where you can get discovery tokens. And so anytime you progress onto a spot that has these discovery tokens, you get to take the whole stack, look through it, and take the one that you want. And it's basically a free action for you to use at some point during the game. The industry track has 3 different spots that will allow you to put one of your ship upgrades into play. And so everybody has an asymmetric set of ship upgrades, and they'll basically just change some of the values in terms of your ships, in terms of going into battle, and just the characteristics of the ships that you'll have in play.
They basically always make them better.
The commerce track dictates how many points you'll get at the end of the game for any leftover resources, including your tactics cards. So if you never progress up this track, your leftover resources are going to be 0 points. But if you get to spot 9 over here, they'll be worth 1 point and then 2 points if you get to 14. And lastly, we have the civilization track, which actually dictates your hand limit for tactics cards. At the start of the game, you have a hand limit of 5. But as soon as you reach space 9, then that increases to 6. And in addition, at that point, you can also draw up until you have 6 cards. Reaching space 14 increases that limit to 7. The supremacy track we'll discuss later when we talk about battle because they have nothing to do with the modules. But the last thing that all of these progress tracks do is they determine how many points your developments are going to be worth at the end of the game. And we'll discuss that as well when we talk about how to make them.
After Monique acquired the first module, she has the right to acquire a second one from either one of these 2. Or she can burn one of the modules from the area that she took. After doing that, all of these modules will then slide down and you refill.
Now, just one thing about the modules before we move on to the next action. Some of the modules will score you points. Some will gain you resources whenever you recall your ships and activate the module. And some modules, like this one, require you to place a moon token on them. And so moon tokens we'll discuss in a second. All right, the next alliance base is the development office. And taking this action allows you to build a development on one of the planetary regions. Now, in order to build a development, the first thing is you have to have a transport already on the planet in which you want to build on. So let's just say, for example, I have my transport on this planet. Each planet can only house one development, and each type of planet has their own unique type of development. So for specifically this planet, this is going to allow me to build this development on it. Now, each development also requires you to have a certain number of leaders, and leaders are these cylindrical pieces. Each player starts with one of them on their board. And over the course of the game, you're going to need to pick up more of your leaders from the board by taking a free action while your ship is there. So for example, had I gone to the development office as a free action, I can take my leader from that spot and back onto my player board. Now, unfortunately, this development requires me to have 3 leaders. So I would have had to pick up an additional leader at some point. So let's just go ahead and take this one. And building development is going to be one of the major ways in which you can score points during this game. To build this development, I first have to pay the resources for it, which is listed on the left-hand side here, which I actually don't have right now. But say I did, I would spend
4 ice.
Yeah, I would spend the 4 ice, and then I would actually take the piece and place my leaders in the development. Once your leaders are locked in, then the development actually sits on top of your transport. And that's where it's going to stay for the rest of the game. The good news, though, is building a development comes with a lot of rewards. So the first thing is you get the development card corresponding to the development. So in this case, I built a city. And then you would get all of the benefits on the card. So I would get to progress up on the corresponding track, which would be this one right there. I would then score victory points immediately, equal to the number of leaders in its region, as well as the surrounding adjacent regions, with a maximum of 10.
So in this case, Monique would get 5 points, 3 here, and then because there's 2 still in the trade hub, an additional 2.
That's right. And lastly, each different type of development card has their own one-time use ability that I now have at my disposal. And so at some point during the game, as soon as I use its ability, I flip it over, and now at the end of the game, this is going to be points depending on how far I progressed up this track. Right now, I've only reached up to level 1, which means this city is going to score me 5 points. But if I can get all the way up to level 3, then it's going to score me 10 points per city that I have on the board.
Right.
And that's essentially how all 5 of the different developments function on the board. They're going to score you points immediately, and then they'll score you points at the end of the game, depending on how far you progressed up their corresponding tracks. Now, the last alliance base that we have is the shipyard. And this is where you're allowed to build additional starships or repair broken starships that are in the scrapyard. So like we were mentioning, you have 4 different types of starships at your disposal. And in order to build one, you have to pay resources that's listed at the top of the specific type of starship you want to build. So as an example, if I want to build my 1 fighter, then I have to pay 1 energy as well as 1 titanium.
Right.
And the only type of starship that you have multiples of are your transports, because of course you're going to need them in order to build developments and such. But each type of starship has their own personality. So for example, my heavy cruiser has not much range, but I get to roll 3 dice when we go into battle, which we'll talk about in a second. And actually, speaking of battle, during battle, some of your ships may become damaged and or sent to the scrapyard. And so taking this action allows you to repair either a module by removing a damage token from it, or a ship, or you can just repair one of the ships in your scrapyard by moving it down to the repair barge. And now it is available for me to send out again.
Right.
And that's essentially all of the alliance bases. Now, again, when you take a launch action, you're just sending your ship to one of these regions and taking the actions on them. Another type of region you may send your ships to are these planets. And going to planets just allows you to take the moon token that's there.
Moon tokens are randomized at the beginning of the game, and you'll always take the top.
That's right. And they always go to one of the 4 spaces here on your faction board until you have a chance to use them. Moon tokens can be placed onto modules, like we were mentioning earlier. So if I wanted to put it on this module over here, when I activate it, I get those resources. So it's kind of a nice way for you to customize the modules that you've built.
You're kind of building in an economy with it.
That's right. They can also go here in your tactical operations area, where whenever you lose a battle, you gain a benefit, which would be either a tactics card or whatever is on your moon token. And so those are just some examples as to how we're going to be using moon tokens in the game.
And if you go to a planet and there's no more moon tokens, you get the depicted resources that are listed below.
That's right. Now, the last type of region are the nebula that are on the very, very edge of Andromeda's edge over here. Only your starships that have a keyword voyage on them can actually go to the nebula. And so in your starting starships, that's just going to be your science vessel. And going to a nebula allows you to take a nebula moon token. And that basically functions the same way as the other types of moon tokens. But in addition, you also get to take the pre-science action, which allows you to look at the top 2 event cards, choose one to keep on top, and then the other one will go on the bottom.
Think of it like you had a premonition. You know what's going to happen in the future.
Now, once you're done taking your action, the raiders strike. So this is a part of your turn that is not going to be as nice for you. The raiders represent the general enemy to all players. And so each different type of raider has their own raider card that tells you their range, their characteristics, how many dice they roll when you go into battle, as well as the reward that you gain for defeating them in battle. At the start of the game, you'll have 2 Vorticon strikers already on the board. And these raiders have a range of 1, which means if you are within a range of 1, they're going to move into your region, just like that. Now, normally, only one type of raider can be in any region at any given time. But because these Vorticon strikers have a swarm characteristic, that means had this one been within range as well, this one would have also moved into my region. Which is bad, Because after the raiders strike, then we go into battle. And battle is only ever done during this phase of a launch turn, and only in the active region. Now, the first thing that happens during battle is anyone who has starships within range can actually move their starships into that region to join the battle. But that always starts with the active player. Afterwards, each player who is involved in the battle may play a diplomacy card from their hand, and these are going to be one of the types of tactics cards that you'll find. For example, I have this diplomacy card called Risky Gambit that says if I win this battle, I can advance one additional time on the supremacy track. Which is great because winning battles allows you to advance naturally on the supremacy track anyway.
Now you must play these diplomacy cards during step 2 of the battle because there are some cards that will stop the battle altogether.
Then you prepare for battle, and this includes determining how many dice you're going to roll by adding up the total number of dice amongst the starships that are present in that region. So for me, I only have my science vessel, which gives me 2 dice.
Sure.
I would also get 1 additional die for each development that I have that's within 1 space of that region. But because my development's all the way over here, I don't get that die.
Sure.
However, I can gain more dice by also spending energy, 1 energy per die. So if I wanted to gain more, I can spend both of these energy for 2 extra dice. And that's always going to be to a maximum of 6 dice. So that's 4 dice total. That's 2 from the ship and then 1 each from each energy that I discarded. Then you determine your targeting value, which is basically the number of starships that you have in the active region, which for me is just 1. And this is bad because the higher the targeting value, the better. Any die value that you roll that is less than your targeting value, you will be allowed to re-roll during battle.
Sure.
Now the raiders, on the other hand, will have a weapon value of 2, which means they will roll 2 dice, as well as a targeting value of 2. So any 1s will be re-rolled. Once that's done, then you're ready for battle. So all players take the dice if you'd care to roll for the raiders.
Sure.
And you roll them simultaneously. And the way that you determine the winner is you basically look at your highest value die and you compare them.
Right.
I don't get to reroll any of my dice, and neither do the raiders because they did not roll a 1. And so my highest value die is a 5 and theirs is a 4, which means I win the battle.
Sure.
If there were a tie, then we would go to the next highest die and so on and so forth.
If by any chance there is a true tie, then all factions will lose.
Right. Now, because I won the battle, I get to progress up the supremacy track, which is one of my rewards. And because I defeated the raiders, I also get the reward depicted on their raider card, which is a tactics card per raider.
Now, if there are any players involved and they lost the battle, then you would get the consolation that's in your tactical operations listed here.
And that's going to be either a tactics card or whatever is on the moon token that you place there. At this point, all of the ships that belong to losing factions become damaged. And so if any of the ships actually have shields on them, then you just place a damage token on the shield. And starships with no shields get moved to the scrapyard. If you defeat raiders, these are removed from play. But because it was a swarm that was defeated, only one of them was removed. And so that's essentially how battle works. Now that's a very simple demonstration of what can take place, but there's a whole lot more that can be done during battle with tactics cards as well as having multiple opponents in the same region. And that's essentially how you take a launch action. Now, alternatively, on your turn, you can return your ships back to your station to activate your modules. For each starship that you're returning from the main board, you can use it to activate an undamaged module in your station. So for example, I can return my transport to my treasury module that comes built into my player sheet. And doing so will gain me an alliance credit, which will be very useful for the future.
Sure.
Now, as soon as I've activated at least one module in the row with a starship, I have the option of activating additional modules in that row by using energy instead of a starship. So if I wanted to activate my scrap vendor, I could just use this energy. Since I've placed this moon token on my scrap vendor, then activating this module will get me a victory point, as well as both a titanium and a nanocarbon, which is going to be very useful because resources are a little bit difficult to obtain right now. And you can basically continue to activate your modules as long as you have starships or energy to activate them with. As for the modules that come built into your board, the shipwright allows you to basically take the action from the shipyard, which is building a ship or repairing a module or a ship. The architect, which is down here, allows you to either draw a tactics card or build a development in the same way that you would when using the development office. And finally, we have the primary reactor, which actually functions a little bit differently from the other 3 modules in the sense that it requires you to use a starship in order to activate it. But once you do so, one activation will activate all of the modules in that row, as long as they're not damaged. So because my gravity dynamo is damaged, unfortunately, I'm not going to get the energy for that module, but I will get the 2 energy for my primary reactor, which is still nice.
And you can skip any modules that you do not want to activate.
Lastly, when taking starships to activate modules, you can not only take them from the board, but you can also take them from the repair barge. However, you cannot take them from the scrapyard.
Right.
So the ship must be repaired before using them to activate a module.
Makes sense.
And once you're done activating all your modules, all of your starships return back to your board completely repaired, which means had you had a starship in the scrapyard, it would return back to your faction board ready for use in your next turn. However, damage that are on your modules still remain, so those you will still have to repair. And that's essentially it. Now, as soon as the token reaches the end of the events track, we are going to get an additional region to add to Andromeda's Edge. And we're also going to resolve the topmost event that's in that deck.
These events will allow players to score points for one of the different tracks, minus the amount of damaged modules they have.
Right. And so for this one in particular, this is Close Encounter. Players will score points depending on how far they are on this track specifically, minus the number of damaged modules.
Right.
In addition, the special effect says in turn order, each player may select and gain a new science or industry module at no cost, and then you refill after each selection, so that's nice. But it also puts a new type of raider into play, which is specifically Raider B. Which is the Saucerian Abductor.
Yes.
Which is, another baddie that we're going to have to deal with. Now, there are a few other details about the gameplay that we didn't discuss, but that is the big picture overview as to what you're going to be doing in this game. Now, as soon as the victory point threshold has been met, whether that's 50, 60, or 70 points, then you finish the active player's turn, and each player, including the active player, gets one more turn. And then you go into final scoring.
At the end of the game, players are going to score points for where they are on each of the 5 different tracks. They'll also score points for their developments, lose 2 points for each module that is still damaged at the end of the game. They'll score points for their leftover resources depending on how far up they are on this track, whether it's 1 for each or 2 to 1 right there.
Or 0.
Or 0. They'll gain rewards from their civilization modules as long as they're not damaged. And 1 point for every leftover leader you still have.
That's right. And at that point, whoever has the most points wins. And that's essentially how you play Andromeda's Edge. I know there's a lot going on here, but there's a lot more to discover as you play the game. Now, if you have any questions about anything that you saw here today, please feel free to leave us a comment down below, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible.
Now, this game is currently on Gamefound, so if you are interested in this game, you can always check out the link in the description down below. Thank you all so much for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was helpful. If you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, please consider subscribing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.